Times are crazy right now with the ever-growing COVID-19 pandemic, and given the closure of most, if not all, movie theaters at this point, and especially because Hollywood has postponed most, if not all, movie releases in the immediate future, I couldn't think of a better time to change things up. So until my movie reviews get back on track, we are going to shift focus and discuss some various movie-related topics in the immediate future. And what better way to kick off these discussions than with my personal list of favorite Disney animated movies? But rather than list my 10 favorite movies of all time, we are going to dive deeper, and I will give you my top 3 favorites within each Disney animation era. To clarify, this will just be Disney animation and will not include Pixar. And we're going to start at the very beginning of Disney Animation's feature-length movie legacy, and it all started with the Golden Age era. And in this era, we have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. Now, even though there weren't too many films released at this time in this era, it really set the foundation for Disney and broke new ground in the world of feature-length animated fairy tales. And like I said, I'm going to list my top 3 favorites within each era. So in the Golden Age era, in the third place, my third favorite goes to Fantasia, my second favorite goes to Pinocchio, and my first favorite of the Golden Age era is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, even though I'm not a fan of Snow White as a Disney princess, I absolutely love the Seven Dwarfs and the Evil Queen. I also appreciated the darker fairy tale elements that Disney didn't shy away from. And so with that, I feel like this movie solidifies itself as the best film of the Golden Age era. And now we move into the Silver Age era, and there are many more films to consider within that time period, and those films in this era include Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, The Sword and the Stone, and Jungle Book. Now, this era was post-war, and I think where Disney animation truly took off and established its identity as an elite animation studio. So as for my top 3 favorites in this era, my third favorite would have to go to Alice in Wonderland, my second favorite is The Sword and the Stone, and my first favorite in this era would be Sleeping Beauty. Now this movie should really be called The Three Good Fairies because they truly are the main heroes of this movie. Aurora doesn't do anything special to make me appreciate her as a princess, but I forgive that because the 3 good fairies make for some wonderful heroes in this tale, and Disney not only gave us the most iconic villain of Disney history with Maleficent, but this movie's epic scale and darker story elements and climactic battle definitely make this movie stand out for me. And it's interesting the parallel between this movie and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs because I didn't care for either of the title princesses and found the villains and supporting characters far more interesting. But all those elements alone add up to why I feel like Sleeping Beauty is the best film within the Silver Age era. Now let's move into the Dark Age era. Some people call it the Bronze era, but I'm going to refer to it as the Dark Age. Now the films within this era include The Aristocats, Robin Hood, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, The Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company. Now this Dark Age era was a soul-searching era for Disney, obviously because it followed the death of Walt Disney himself, and the studio struggled to find its new identity without his leadership, which resulted in a number of films that didn't perform nearly as well critically and at the box office as the previous 2 eras before it, and even though most, if not all of these films underperformed, that doesn't make all of them bad films. So going into my top 3 within the Dark Age era, my third favorite is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, my second favorite is The Great Mouse Detective, and my first favorite would be Robin Hood. Now for Robin Hood, I absolutely loved this movie growing up, and it surprises me that it falls in the Dark Age era when I did my research, and I don't see any qualms with the film, nor can I speak to the box office numbers it brought in. Sure, it doesn't have an official Disney princess, nor is the villain the most menacing, but the movie is heartfelt and hilarious, and if I were to pick one movie that is too good to be a part of the Dark Age, it would be this one. And now we move into the Renaissance era. I think we all know this era. The films in the Renaissance era include The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan. Now, the Renaissance era is without a doubt the most groundbreaking era of Disney animation, an era that brought about the creative partnerships with Alan Menken and Howard Ashman, who created the most iconic Disney songs in all of Disney history, and it's also the era where Disney got its stride back, coming out of the Dark Age, and delivered the most innovative and influential animated films of all Disney history, and in my opinion, of all animated films of all time. When most people recall their favorite childhood Disney movie, almost all of them will say it's one of the movies from this era. It's just a fact. And it's so hard to break down my top 3 favorites because I absolutely love about every single movie within this era. So narrowing it down to my top 3 was really hard, and my top 3 could really be sprinkled out between 3 other films. But in my number 3 spot, I gotta go with Aladdin. In my number 2 spot, I'm giving it to Little Mermaid. And in my number 1 spot, my number 1 favorite of the Renaissance era is undoubtedly Beauty and the Beast. Now, it's no surprise to me that this movie was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars that very same year. Not Best Animated Feature, because I don't believe that category existed. Nominated for Best Picture. That is amazing to me. Talk about history in the making and a true honor. This movie continues to remain elevated above so many animated movies releasing even to this day. And not only is the movie my favorite of the Renaissance era, but it also happens to be my favorite Disney animated movie of all time. The music, the magic, the depth, the richness. There is nothing like this movie, even to this day, and this tale, as old as time, continues to remain timeless to many. And that is why I definitely consider it to be the best of the Renaissance era for Disney. And next we move into what is being called the second Dark Age era. And the films in this era include Fantasia 2000, Dinosaur, The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, Brother Bear, Home on the Range, Chicken Little, Meet the Robinsons, and Bolt. Now, just like life, the ups and downs continue, and this era proved to be another identity crisis period for Disney, while also experimenting with new computer animation technology that eventually leads us to the end of 2D Disney animation as we've known it. It's discouraging to say that coming out of the Renaissance era that Disney did take a bit of a plummet in terms of creativity, in terms of delivering groundbreaking fairy tales like they did in the Renaissance era. It was another soul-searching period for them for sure. But breaking down this second Dark Age era, my third favorite I will give to Treasure Planet. My second favorite I'm going to give to The Emperor's New Groove. And my first favorite of this era would go to Lilo and Stitch. Now, much like how Robin Hood was a gem to me in its dark age, I feel the same way about Lilo and Stitch. This is an endearing movie about friendship told in such a way that Disney hadn't done before, quite like that. Sure, it's not an epic fairy tale, but the dynamic between Lilo and Stitch is so heartfelt and endearing, and I really enjoyed this cute movie quite a lot. But I'm happy to say that there is light at the end of the tunnel of this second dark age because we are now living and experiencing the newest era for Disney animation, and that is being called the Revival era. Some call it the Second Renaissance, and I can understand why to a degree, but I'm going to stick with calling it the Revival era. And those movies include, thus far, The Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Winnie the Pooh, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Frozen 2. Now, I think calling this era the Revival era is incredibly fitting because it's in this era, this current age of Disney animation, where I feel we've seen Disney really step up its game again and start delivering films that truly do remind me of the films that we've seen in the Renaissance era. They're not quite at that level, but I feel that they are definitely on the right track to potentially getting back to the level of storytelling as the Renaissance era. It definitely gives me hope and it excites me. And there are some wonderful gems of films in Disney animation that have released recently. So narrowing it down to my top 3 favorites, in my number 3 spot, we have Frozen 2. In my number 2 spot, we have Zootopia. And my number 1 favorite movie in the revival era of Disney animation is Tangled. Not only did Disney introduce who I argue is one of the best, most creative, most endearing Disney princesses and heroines of all time, but it's in Tangled that I felt that they recaptured some of the magic of the Renaissance. Everything from the supporting characters to a truly menacing, scene-stealing villain to a heartfelt love story, one of the best love songs and love sequences I've seen in Disney history. It was well-paced, it was enchanting, it was magical, it also had depth to it, it had twists to it. It really reminded me of some of the best moments in the Disney Renaissance. Something about Tangled just stuck with me, and honestly, it shocked me when I saw it because we had just come out of the second dark age of Disney. Expectations were low. No one was really all that excited for Disney animation anymore. And Tangled was the first ray of sunshine, shining a light on what I feel like is leading us down the right path for Disney in getting back to what they were. Tangled resonated with me in so many ways, and that is why it's undoubtedly my favorite movie thus far in the revival era of Disney animation. So in summary, here are my favorites within each Disney era of animation. In the Golden Age, we have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The Silver Age, Sleeping Beauty. The Dark Age, Robin Hood. The Renaissance era, Beauty and the Beast. The Second Dark Age, Lilo and Stitch. And finally, the Revival era, it's Tangled. Those are my personal favorites and my opinions of what I feel like to be the best of Disney within each era. Again, if I were to have just picked my top 10 of all time, let's be honest, most of the films would have been from the Renaissance era, much like other people, so that's why I wanted to give some love to all the other eras of animation and the gems of filmmaking that came from each one of them. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. What are your favorite all-time Disney movies? What do you consider to be the best of each Disney animation era? Do you agree with a number of my choices? I would love to hear them below, so feel free to comment away. And thank you all again for tuning in and sitting down with me as we talk about some of my favorite Disney movies. And until next time, you guys, I'm Ryan Boehme, and I'm signing off. Bye, everyone.